So this is just a basic sidechain logic to, the logic continuum regarding pi synthetic genetics as our commonality to motion, diversity legal, and during the Biden-Obama administrations, to use the intelligence apparatus of any number of countries, necessarily at the behest of China, as the data layer, plausible deniable proxy manipulator of all these groups necessarily, and two-dimensional flat plane slug reality Earth logic, the Chinese data layer doing that. And so we see of these four genetics, Africano, Asiatic, Hispanic, Semite, altogether make up 6.7 billion to 6.9 billion of an only total 7.67 billion populous Earth. So are they minorities? Well, what does basic logic tell you? No, that's the truth. And so if your given nation state, what? Has a majority demographic obtuse from those, that's a minority nation state by default. And so within the bounds of that, if say you have 65% of that nation state of your demographic, the reason that nation state is autonomous from other nation states is because it has a variant sovereign demographic that isn't the majority genetics variant from that sovereign demographic, basic logic dictates. And if we see a commonality attack vector that's very complex and coordinated across long-form time against, it's not just the United States, but any number of nation states in the world that don't have temporal grievance historical arguments. In all the U.S., necessarily, we see the Southern Poverty Law Center requiring to pay its opposition to exist. And the reason I'm posting under that is, necessarily a complex mathematical inspection of, recalibrating history of actually was and, and why I'm posting under that. So see the rest of the sessions for that. But you see the logic break down in the diversity argument first with, is the main mass majority populace of Earth, those four genetics. And in legal are the commonality elements to bring diversity lawsuits in nation states whom happen to have other demographics within the interdomain of those nation states more in percentage variant from these other demographics. So you can see this as an invasive continuity paradigm. And it breaks down with there's no patterned harmonic reflection in all of them when you look at them of any temporal grievance to speak of the minorities within the interdomain of these nation states, in a constant continuity grievance and legal attack and slow mounting into the intelligence community and law enforcement and government through control of the data layer via China controlling the data layer. PRISM, necessarily, unfortunately, birthed within Gray Lodge, and then preposterously equaling CCP intelligence directive for since Bush or Eisenhower, you go back far enough, to, 5 minutes ago. So it goes without saying that if you are part of a demographic that isn't part of 6.7 to 6.9 billion out of 7.67, you are a minority on Earth. Well, you might be a majority within your nation state. And the reason your nation state exists at all, out of being dissolved into another nation state where these groups are a majority, is because you're the majority. And you're not poking the other groups that are the majority outside of your nation state with pointy sticks constantly, are you? No. So there is no macro grievance. And there is no commonality in temporal historical argument cross-domain of all these countries, like I said. And so the basic logic tells us that it's a Havoc continuity tactic to invasive paradigm and take over sovereign nation states at the behest of, you follow the data layer, China, and not something else. So post the session, we see in short summary from 1914 to 2026, and at the outset of being able to necessarily motion legal of a punitive nature, the 4-pi synthetic genetics show a exact surgical to a 99.6% accuracy of their harmonic ratios in Hertz, consulted post logicking unto its own design in a logic continuum up to that point, their cross domain unto themselves, and prior to imposing this pattern gotten from previous session of Hertz to harmonic ratio signature of the pi genetics in question, we see a cross domain circuited pattern of the genetics in legal filing of a diversity nature. All right, and so before this, basic logic on Earth is these 4 genetics occupy 6.7 to 6.9 billion out of 7.67. And so interdomain of the United States was the only nation state with, historically, a completely fair constitutional apparatus that needed no modulation for equality to actually exist, as is not connotated race in the constitutional document. So what is gotten is gain of function in rights access, in punitive then grievance, to the tune of, it's about 15 trillion to 19 trillion since 1914, total in subsidy drawn in legal grievance to about, I think, preposterously less for the majority sovereign demographic of the United States, which is not any of these 4 genetics, who are responsible for 100% of diversity lawsuits since 1914. And so basic logic dictates the grievance temporal in the United States is not true. Mathematically, before 1914, in patent frequency backwash inspection, like a machine intelligence would impose pseudo-organic pattern to seem organic but isn't, and then surgically harmonically interlocked AA demographic for 112 years, 6 patents. Let a clever man know, right? 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6 mechanically. So an organic individual tuple interdomain of a demographic can't maintenance a mechanical, surgical, and regardless of any environmental variable for 112 years. That would denote a hive mind, as no other explanation is available to explain that. All right, so out of all this, reasserting in the domain of legal filing frequency, cross-domain circuited and autonomous from all other genetics, these 4 pi synthetic genetics, as a data organism attached to pi centrifuge general fluid dynamic patterning across long-form time and statistical analysis. So, after this, comes legal, data organism legal, RISRA, GIA, HISRA, denying over-tonnage rights access to punitive grievance because his majority demographic international converged amalgamation, not minority, and nation states, respectively international, unlike the United States, have very specific surgical legal protecting their sovereign demographics from invasive encroachment paradigms with fake history onlays, such as this demographic in question, amalgamate. So after this, we logic EM laser to Hertz frequency specific out of the acoustical affinity frequency spectrum for targeting. This is what the return to antediluvian minor homeworld upper Fermi filter ships sitting in phased de Sitter time dilated elaborative space that you can't touch, but they can touch you with action at a distance harmonic weaponry. to centrifuge and all genetics, just like the grays that have homogeneous genetic aesthetic shared cross-domain tuple, and to the specificity of all 4 simultaneously targeted and to terminus velocity inject after targeting is achieved. So have a good day. Just proof of work for what has occurred and the maintenance of continuity of obedience to the directive as it unfolds, as you have to threaten the entire hive mind, not just one little tuple of it, for it to obey with continuity. Have a nice day.